Well, the laundry project is almost finished. I haven't done the trim on it and things like that. So, of course, it's time to jump into a new project because why would we finish off the old one? Get back to that later someday. So, a little backstory on this. I built that for my son years ago now, and he absolutely loves it. My daughter, however, has a more traditional bed and recently came up to me out of the blue and said, she's 3, adorable, goes, "Daddy, am I your princess?" Of course, I answered, "Well, yes, sweetheart, you are." And she goes, "Okay, so build me a castle, okay? Bye." And then went away. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to build my daughter a castle bed. I'm doing this kind of design build because that's my style. I have inspiration off a few things I found online, but most of the ones, if I were to try to buy it, are around like that $3,000 to $6,000 range. I'm going to try to do this for more like 500 and take you along as we go. None of this, if I can do it the way I've got in mind, is particularly difficult. So this is a pretty approachable project if you want to build something like this. When it's all said and done, I will include plans and material costs and everything else that you need if you want to do this yourself. And we'll go through it step by step. It won't have lights quite like this, but it will have lights. So with projects like this, I always begin with sketching. I just grab paper and just start jotting down ideas. And I had a bunch of them that I've now thrown away. And what I've landed on for a look is this, including the water stain that, of course, I set this down in water just before filming this video, so stuff happens. But that's roughly what I'm looking for. This is a basic rectangular frame bed, very similar to my son's loft bed. It'll have a bunch of the same structure. It does have columns on the corners to give it that castle look, and hopefully it'll look something like this when it's done. This is what I'm envisioning for the sides of it. So this obviously will be the front, and then the back side, or the left side, if you were, and then the right side, which faces her closet. So there'll be a wall here and an opening over here in this closet and window. On that side, I'm going to be doing a larger entry door for adults and steps to go up to the top. The top is just going to be an open area kind of for play. So nothing really special or fancy up there. I'll probably throw down carpet pad and carpet and do a few things just so it's kind of soft and open. But this is roughly what we're looking at. This is a sheet of 4x8 plywood that I'll cut a little bit. There's some cutouts here on the sides that I'll explain as we go that have to do with my vision for how these towers are going to work. I have an idea on the towers as well. I'm not fancy enough to think I can build giant columns in a way that would look good. And I don't really want to do square columns because that's less of the Princess Castle vibe that I'm going for. So I have an idea involving concrete molds for footings. So these big cardboard essential columns that I think we can dress up a little bit, reinforce a little bit, and paint, and they should provide the corners that I need because it doesn't have to be load bearing or anything else. It won't be structural. It's purely just for the look. So went to Menards, bought materials. I'm sitting at about $350 in materials right now, and we're gonna get started by cutting out these panels and getting them ready to connect together and possibly have the main structure of this thing together today. Okay, so I've got my panel cut down to 7 feet, which is gonna be the length of the bed. And I've started laying out a few indicators for myself. So this line here in the bottom is gonna be the bottom edge of the door. It's 34 inches wide. It was gonna be 2 feet, but after looking at it actually drawn out, realized it wasn't quite wide enough. So I spread it out a little bit more. These little dashed lines on the side are about where I anticipate the columns to overlap. So that's just a marker for myself, knowing that that space is going to be covered. And then the center line lines up with the center point of the panel, and that's to measure the top of my door. Since my plan is to have an arch, what I need to do now is figure out how to actually draw that arch. So I have a 34-inch wide door. So what I've done is I've taken a piece of scrap material, and I've got my carpentry pencil here, and I've got it actually pushed down in so that that will push just south of the wood once I extend the lead. And then down here, I have a hole that I've drilled that's 17 inches from where that carpentry pencil will stick through and that point. What that's gonna let me do then is place this directly on the top mark of my door, run one screw into that little mark right there, and then I'll be able to just turn this and get the arch that I want so it'll be nice and smooth, and I'll just cut it out with my jigsaw. So it worked. Essentially that just draws right along the line. Gives me a nice smooth arch, and then I just have to use a square to come up from the corner to where it connects to that line, and we'll be good to go. All right, main panel's drawn out. I used the same tool and technique for the side windows. I just moved the kind of center marker hole in so that I had a 4-inch radius as opposed to the 17-inch radius on the big one. So that allowed me to get those windows set up. Everything is even and level and ready to go. So I'm gonna drill holes in the corners and then I'll use my jigsaw and cut everything out. So our first panel is cut. I need to do a little bit of sanding just to clean up the edges, but went ahead and cut out what will be eventually a window into the inside of the columns that are gonna go on the corner. That's one of the things I still have to figure out a little bit. I'm planning to use those concrete tubes to actually make the columns themselves. So the hope is I'll be able to cut them in a way that they still maintain their shape, and they'll be able to slot over the corner, and then this will be a little opening into a shelf so that there'll be a little round kind of shelf that my daughter can use to store stuff on and everything else. But windows are placed, main door is cut. I've got the door section that was cut out that I'm going to set aside because I don't know, all castles need drawbridges, so we may eventually do that. And this is exactly the size of the opening. So if nothing else, as a template, it's going to be invaluable later. So I don't have to redraw the angles and everything else. So we'll set that aside, get back to it later. Okay, for the next part, you need to look at your material and figure out which side is going to be the front versus the back. It didn't really matter until now because they're all symmetrical in the way I'm building it, but it does matter for this step. So this is the sanded side of the plywood that I'm using. This is the side that's the cleanest from a painting standpoint, so I'm going to use this one to face out into the room. There are a couple places where the corners blew out a little bit, kind of while I was cutting them. Not too worried about that because I'm going to be doing some windowsills and stuff to dress it up once it's all done, so that's not a big deal. The reason you have to find the outside, however, has to do with how we're going to attach these panels together. So I'm using a method I used on my son's bed. Essentially, what we're going to do is take a couple 1x3s and we're going to cut them to length so that they lay right along this edge on either side of that gap. And then eventually, that's what our bolts are going to run through to connect this to the sides. So the front panel is completed. I've got the side pieces glued and nailed just using 1 1/4 inch brad nails, just to kind of hold it. I don't really care if they're visible because you're not going to be able to see it. The column should cover that. So I'm working on the side piece, and I want to just give you a hint with this. So I've already got the cutout for the turret shelf done. I've got the main door where the mattress is going to get slid in, and where we as adults will probably access this the most, even though my daughter will probably use the front. And then I'm working on the climbing wall, because with Princess Castle, of course, you have to climb the wall to get to the top. So what I'm doing with this is I'm using a hole saw to cut the initial hole, and then to clear off the footsteps, what I'm doing is a couple cuts. So you can see I've got that kind of drawn out the way I'm going to do it. And the first cut with my jigsaw is coming from the hole and angling down to the corner. My second cut will be down along the side of the hole to the corner. And then I'll go from this side and cut all the way down to this corner. And then again, angling along the hole and going down to that corner. And what you'll end up with is this kind of window shape that gives a nice level platform for them to step on. I'm not so worried about how this looks. I'm going to sand it, and then there will be a little, probably additional platform that I'm going to build here just to give a little bit of a better footstep. Give them a little traction as they go up. Last step then, after I get that one cut, I'll have a single wide kind of step that runs here that goes the entire width, just so they have a place to sort of, rest their feet as they climb onto the very top. So my climbing rungs are done. Now I'm putting the edge pieces on. So this is a 1x3. It's lined up to be flush with what will be the outside. So this is the inside of the panel. And coming up from that, and I have pocket holes running down the side just to hold it, as well as construction adhesive run down along inside this gap to keep everything nice and tight. Well, it's a little hard to show this in the garage, but the basic structure is together. I haven't actually bolted anything. The reason it's bolts as opposed to screws or anything else is so that this can be disassembled and taken inside. It is very heavy and very kind of awkward. So essentially what ends up happening with the side pieces that we did the offset on and then the face piece that we did the flat on, a bolt will get drilled straight through there. And then I can do like a T-nut on the back or something captive to make it a little bit easier to hook in. And I can actually recess it here in the front so it's not so obvious. That'll all be inside the column. So once the columns are on, you won't see any of it. But this is where we're going to stop for tonight. I haven't built the back piece. The back is going to be open. So essentially it's a 1x6 that's going to run along the bottom. And then probably another 1x6 or 1x4 that'll run across the top. It'll just be an open panel, very similar to these, with 1x3s on the end that I can bolt through. And that should give us our stability. And then once that's all done, I'll put a little support along the side here, run cross pieces across the top, drop a piece of plywood on it, and we'll have a nice, secure top for them to play on. So one thing's off in my messy garage with a dad joke, as usual. So which state has the most streets? That one's easy. Really shouldn't even ask. It's obviously Rhode Island. All right, we'll see you for the next part.